Welcome back to Local Lunch on UCFM. Right now, we're joined by a very special guest via Zoom, Geordie from Cisco. Thanks for joining us, mate.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Now, first things first, I wanted to congratulate you on your fifth studio album, Under the Light, but
Thank you.
I'll
Thank you
get
very
to that
much.
a little bit shortly. This is Local Lunch, and on the show, I typically highlight local music from Canberra. But obviously, you and your band are from WA. And at the
Yeah.
moment, the WA music scene is kind of booming with so many amazing artists coming up from over west. Why do you think that is, and what may be triggering it?
I don't know. That's what I feel like we've been asked that question for the last 10 years and I don't really know. I think maybe because we're so isolated, um, and it's quite a small pond, I guess, so people can't really be copying each other too much. I don't know. I've heard a bunch of different theories. Nick Albrook from Pond, he wrote a pretty interesting piece on it a couple of years ago as to why he thinks the Fremantle and Perth is producing great music. But I don't know. Maybe it's the weather. It's a great place to live.
Exactly. Maybe it is the weather, but it's certainly a unique sound coming from over there. You said that you've been getting that asked that question for the last 10 years, but obviously you and your band got your start a little bit before that. What was it like for you guys to get onto that WA music scene?
I think it was very organic, and I think we were also very lucky with when we sort of came together. I'll try and keep it brief, but pretty much Scarlett, the drummer in the band, she was in a a kid rock band called the Flares that were like they they were like 13 and they were really good. And Scarlett's dad, who's John Butler's manager and the Waves manager, decided to put on this show called the Garage Kids Ball, where all of these like teen bands could play and all the underage kids could go and like have a proper gig experience. Um, and I feel like those gigs were the things that those shows were what sort of made these much more amateur kid bands, which I was a part of one, and it was quite a good little lineup. Really pushed us to the next level to get on the bill to play these garage kid ball shows, and then from there, yeah, it was like this melting pot, and all those kid bands sort of broke up, and like I started playing with Scarlet, and yeah, it all just sort of happened. I mean, weren't really thinking about it at the time. It was just something we did.
Yeah, and look at where you guys have got to. Flash
Yeah.
forward now to 5 albums later, and you've just released your latest one, Under the Light. Can you tell us a bit about that one?
This one we recorded at home in our home studio in Fremantle. All the other records, we'd done the vast majority of them either in New South Wales or Victoria. And we did it with a new producer called James Island, which was like a whole new experience. It's like having a new fourth person in the room, which just changes the dynamics and like and his skills and his strengths, what he brings to the table. And it was we were sort of living our normal lives and writing a record at the same time. We were still being able to see our friends and our partners and our families and also sort of bounce ideas off all the people that were close around us and yeah, it was a very different experience to what we've usually done, which is like we'll go away and lock ourselves in a room for a couple of months and just crank out an album. Obviously with like demos and stuff done before that. But yeah, it was a lot more. Uh, it wasn't relaxed, but it was a lot more organic in like our lives. It just became a part of our lives making this record, and I think we were able to really explore things that we hadn't been able to before, which felt quite like free and new and fun.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Would you say that that kind of open lifestyle with recording whilst you were recording the album, did that kind of trigger a lot of inspiration for some of the songs on there?
I think I don't know directly how it did, but I'm sure it did. Yeah, and I don't know if I found it easier or harder because obviously when you're at home and everyone's around, there's people being like, "Hey, come down to the pub," or like, "Oh, we should go do this weekend." It can be quite distracting. So I really had to work on self-discipline, which I think was a good lesson. Yeah, I'm not quite sure how it affected the writing. I mean, sometimes I'd come home and be like, "What do you think about this idea for a song?" Or like these lyrics, and whoever I was with would be like, "Yeah, I like that," or like, "Well, I don't know about that." So I'm sure there were like little tweaks here and there.
I read that you recorded the album between Fremantle and LA. That's quite a drastic contrast between cities. And I wanted to know, what was the American recording experience like?
Well, it's not quite as lavish as it sounds. What it actually was James, the producer, was in America and Scarlett was traveling through America and she went and recorded drums and I think a few vocals there. So I didn't even go.
Oh, I see. I see. So you stayed in
She
Fremantle for most of it then.
Yeah, yeah, I was in Fremantle, but they just had access to this incredible studio and were able to pull get some like great drum sounds and some synth sounds over there. So they did that together over there on like four of the tracks.
I see. I see. Very cool. But something that you did do as a whole band was the recent tour to Europe. Tell me a bit about that. How was that for the band?
Oh, it was great. We hadn't been to Europe for a while, um, but it was amazing to go back there. And even though the shows are quite small, they're all sold out, and the fans were mainly people. Well, I feel like they were mainly people that have known us since, like awkward or like since the early days, and they've just stuck with us over the years. And we'd go meet some of them after, and they would tell us all these stories about, um, I guess like how our songs have like played through their lives, and it was just it felt very, yeah, it felt very lucky to have that. And we were driving around in a Sprinter van, and we had Scarlett's mum and dad on tour. Her dad was he was like the designated driver, and he's English, so he kind of like knows his way around the UK and Germany and the Netherlands. And then Scarlett's mum was selling merch, and um, they're just like a very entertaining family just to witness. They're like very high energy.
Lots of fun with the
So that
parents
was
on
like,
tour, I can imagine.
well, they're pretty fun. They're pretty fun parents, and it just brings like a whole different dynamic to touring because you're usually just the band and your crew, and you're a bunch of tired tour dogs that are like a little bit jaded, and then having these like you know parents on the road just wanting to say hello to everybody and make new friends and like organize their own personal meet and greets with fans for us after the show. And yeah, you never really knew what would happen with them at the helm, but it was
Yeah.
great. It was very entertaining.
That does sound very entertaining, very fun. Next Wednesday, you're going to kick off the second half of your massive Australian tour. That's, I suppose, has been going on for the last few months now. You're obviously going to start down in the cold in Jindabyne, but what should people expect for that half of the tour?
Oh yeah, just like fun. I think we try and create as much of a party as we can for each show, but then have a few sort of quiet, more intimate moments, but mainly just like great times and partying and keeping each other warm.
Awesome. Well, that's all I have to ask for you today, but thank you so much, Geordie, for joining me on Local Lunch.
That's all good. Thank you for having me.